Alrighty, welcome to the Firmware Emotive Podcast, and you're listening to John Kai Herbert. And on today's episode, I'll be talking about the false hope in fighting racism, a chessboard covered in pawns. Now, I chose that title because I feel like the complexity of our society, the complexity of our systems, the complexity of us as individuals is much like a chessboard. And the amount of energy, the amount of attention that we have to spend on a day-to-day basis requires us to focus on things that are right for us. Then when we abdicate our authority to movements and things that get us all emotional and we feel like we need to be a part of them, then it can drive civilization in all kinds of odd directions. And I feel this one is one of them. Now, the false hope is because there's this kind of utopia attached, and I'll go into more of this, where it's like if we could only beat racism, if we could only beat white supremacy and systemic racism, then everyone's going to be okay. We're going to be balanced, and we'll lay down our swords and we don't need to fight anymore. I'm just going to grab my water bottle here. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see some slides that I'll be speaking to. And if you're just listening on the podcast, then hi, welcome. Thank you for putting me in your ears. So I'm just going to jump to the next slide here. So what I'm going to talk about tonight, on this beastly episode, is my story. So my story around racism, how I experience racism, and the intention is of trying to push a fight racism, and racism is the issue agenda, the psychology behind it, some history, some economics, some biology, education, authority, Australia, and the hyperdimensional components, what's next, and references. So Australia has a very, I feel, unique circumstance in regards to systems and prejudice and bigotry, and I feel like we need to address it differently to how America is addressing it. So without further ado, let's get stuck into my story. Now, I was born in England, and in that moment my dad felt like it was important for us to leave England for multiple reasons. One reason that he wanted to start a farm in Australia, and the other reason was that there was a lot of racism there, or bigotry, or prejudice, or whatever you want to call it. Just having a drink of water. Now, that said, my uncles on my mother's side, so my mother is from the Caribbean, and she's coloured, not struck match coloured. She's like she's dark, and so there's and they're quite successful. They're quite in the realms of what success is considered. I feel like on my mum's side there's a lot of trauma that's unaddressed, and I feel like that's partly because in England you don't really talk about that stuff, or feel that stuff. Emotions are something that's not explored. So anyway, my dad decided to move out to Australia, where he felt like it was a better land of opportunity and less racism, prejudice, and bigotry. When we got here, I remember my first bout of racism. I was about 4 or 5-ish, and we were walking in a car park, and I was quite an adventurous lad. I enjoyed wandering forward away from my parents, or just wandering, and I was walking in a car park, and there was maybe I was 4 or 5 cars ahead of my parents, and it was daytime, and there was a guy ahead of me that was helping another car back out, and he said stop there, and I was like miles away from this car backing out, And, and I realized that he wanted me to stop, and I could see a car was pulling out, and I was like, well, safe. And then I remember him saying like, oh, I must not speak English. And it wasn't so much what he said, it was also in like the tone of how he said it, and like and just the assumption, like, and there was no love, there was no compassion there. It was basically, oh, you must not speak English. And my parents, I don't feel my parents heard it, however I heard it, and I remember it quite distinctly. And for me, like, it's really more bigotry than racism. Like that example there, like the energy behind it, it was more like, just ignorance. Like I was coloured, and not as coloured as my mum, and so between like white and darker brown. And at school, I experienced more racism, or prejudiced bigotry. There was kids that used to beat me up in kindergarten, so they would find me. I'd try and hide at lunchtime and recess. Recess is like play lunch, little lunch, or big play lunch, recess and lunch, or little lunch and big lunch. And they would find me in the playground and beat me. Like they would like pin me up against a wall, and they would say horrible things to me about like going home and I don't belong there, and it was quite evil. Like it felt evil, and so I was quite afraid of, like, I'd hide from them, and I'd be excluded from games. There was I don't know if you remember, or if you have never heard of this. When we played Tip a lot. So Tip was a game where like one person would be it, and then you'd have to chase around other people that weren't it, and then when you touch them, they would be it, and then have to chase other people that weren't it, and that was basically a game in the playground. And then to initially find the person who was it, you do like a little nursery rhyme things, like eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a nigger by the toe. So, like for me, I had no idea what nigger was, and I remember them being like a bodily reaction to that word, and I didn't understand what it was. However, so more school bullying. I get picked on the bus. So on the bus home, I used to be called a black shit. I didn't understand why. I never understood why. And the kids these kids were in my block. So they were maybe like a kilometre or so from where I lived when we catch the bus home. And they'd try and beat me up and, just be nasty. And granted, there may have been moments where I was a smart ass. However, I just remember them being violent to me. And we do choose to remember the world as we experienced it, regardless of the biases. So then more school stuff. So I went to a public school, 2 public schools, and then a private school. And one public school the last public school that I went to, I actually felt really at home. Like it was a good school. And I feel like that may have had something to do with socioeconomically with the area, and just the maturity of the people. Like I was attractive to women. Like women wanted to be with me and go to the dances with me, and it was something that stood out for me as I'm starting to feel accepted. Like I could play like board games, and I was included in Tip, and there was a whole bunch of things that made me socially accepted there. I'm not entirely sure what it was. Maybe there was other people that got picked on that made me feel less picked on. I remember we had some kids there that were of Sikh. They're from the Sikh religion, and they would wear the hair ties, cover up their hair. And me personally, like I remember teasing them. And I remember there was a moment where they were being there was something happened, there was a fight that happened. I remember retaliating towards them, in the same kind of vitriol that was used on me. I'm remembering that right now, just as I flash back through my years at school. Now, in the workplace, just having another sip of water there. In the workplace, I had work in not-for-profits and work in the film and TV industry, and I didn't really encounter that much racism. There was I'd say there's a fair amount of prejudice and bigotry. I excelled very quickly in my job. I was very good at what I did. I was very intelligent. 17 years in corporate. There would be jokes. Like, there's a lot of movies started coming out, a bit like Bad Boys and like Dave Chappelle. So there was lots of comedy around being coloured, and like I'd have workmates that would affectionately refer to me as nigger. And for me, like I got it. Like, it's more about the intent and the feeling than anything else. And like, there may have been moments where it felt jarring because of what I've been told about what nigger meant. However, like, for me, it was just like whatever the visceral reaction for me wasn't like I don't call me that felt like it was warranted. I didn't care. Home life. So, being multi-racial family, if you want to call it a multiracial family. So, again, race is a patriarchal construct, and I need to use it for context. My home life, it was more cultural differences that were the issue, where my mum, more from like an equatorial culture of more relaxation, very slow, and much more of an emotional collectivist type upbringing. Collectivist means that you're more for the community. You sacrifice yourself a lot for your community. And then my dad, from a European background, much more individualist, the kind of clash there. And there was never really a bridge between the two. And I touched on humor before, around like Dave Chappelle. Like, I feel like humor is such an important part in coming together, because it really does break down a lot of barriers, and the context of humor just really makes light of the cosmic joke and the stereotypes. Like, stereotypes are real. Like, there's a Dave Chappelle skit about eating like chicken, and I don't know if you've seen it. However, like, he was in a red state, or a state that is notorious for like bigotry, prejudice, and he walks into a store, and the guy behind the counter says, as soon as you walked in, we knew that you were going to order the chicken. It was like, it's just really funny. I like chicken, and you got to see it. Like, I'm gonna butcher it, and I'm just gonna kill it anyway. So, what this means, like in the framework of academics that study racism and the social sciences, is this is based on standpoint theory. And standpoint theory is around your own individual experience. So if you say that you've been on the receiving end of racism, bigotry, or prejudice, then that is your reality, which, okay, that is fine. However, this moves it outside of a therapeutic situation. And for me, this is where it gets like perniciously dangerous. Pernicious means danger over time. It gets progressively worse over time without you knowing, like a slow boiling, a frog in a pot. A frog jumps into this is an idiom or a saying or a parable, or like a slow-boiled frog. Like a frog might jump into a pot of cold water, and then when you boil it slowly, it dies, not knowing that it was slowly being cooked. So, like in a therapeutic situation, the counselor would explore, or a therapist would explore the reality of the person, allow them to vocalize it, allow them to explore it, and then do a reality test. And check their story, like what's their narrative, like what's going on for them. Now, whenever it feels like this, I'm going to rattle off some terms here, and not rattle off. I'm going to talk about some terms here that sometimes comes up when people are questioning when a coloured person says that they've never experienced racism. And it also applies to like sexism and a whole bunch of other of the isms that have come out of the social sciences and the pejorative of grievance studies, or some of those the sexual social sciences. That's called internalized racism or oppression. So if you're unaware of it and you say you haven't experienced it, then you must be internalizing it. Which personally I feel like is an incredible gaslight, because if someone's saying that, no, you have experienced this, or this is what you've experienced, it's like, well, what the hell is going on? Like, don't tell me my reality. And I feel like this is where a lot of the activists don't understand. And a lot of these social sciences are created to grow activism. Like it's not a passive science where it's like, this, and then you can make your decisions from that. Social sciences like feminism and gender studies, social sciences like gender studies are designed to create activists. And so for me, like I'm open to the concept of having internalized racism and oppression, but for my life and from my own standpoint there, from my own experience, like it's not something that I really highly prioritize as something that's stopping me from living my life. So when somebody else that doesn't want to dive deep into their past or like what their reality check, like what's happened for them, or be grateful for what they've received, or there can be this outrage of like, wait, what? I've been oppressed. So, oh my God, like my whole life, all of my pain, all of my hurt is the quote unquote white man has caused all this pain, or white supremacy has caused all this pain, or rich white people, or like all this like a bait and switch type game where, here's all your pain, here's what's going on, and then who caused it? White men. It's like it's not real, it's not fair. It's like you've just stirred up all this emotion, stirred up all this trauma without any reality testing, and then you're telling somebody else is responsible for all of your pain and all of your hurt. Now, another sip of water there. In a therapeutic situation, there's some catharsis that's required there. So like for me, like it wasn't until like I learned about what catharsis was, an emotional release, and I was hanging on to all this like trauma. Now, talking about oppression, like I feel like oppression is a zero-sum game, where you're telling someone that these other people are oppressing you, and then you need to take from another person in order to try and equalize what's going on. And I feel like saying that one person is oppressing another person is it takes away your power of someone who can make change, make choice, and it's for me. I feel like it does more of a disservice than some kind of empowerment. Now, this is an interesting one. Now, I get asked these questions a lot, and they are, where are you from and what do you do? And for me, like I find these phrases the most non-personal questions. Like, where am I from? like the shadow behind that question could be anything from why are you not white? Why don't you look like me? Or like why can I trust you? Like what can tie me to you? And this is part of like looking for safety. It's a shadow of looking for safety. Where are you from? Is like where am I from? It tells you nothing about who I am. Like I spent 4 years in England. Means nothing. Like most of my adulthood have been in Australia. So it's like where am I from is like such a stupid question for me. And then there's like what am I from genetically or geographically or culturally? Like where am I from is like one of these unconscious questions for me that is more about the other person than about me. And for me being quite selfish, I want to talk about me. So ask me about a question. The other question is what do you do? What do you do is a like a psychological short slang I feel for what class do you belong in? Like it's a class question. Like what do you do? Are you an academic? Are you blue collar, white collar? Are you in politics? Are you what do you do? So straight away, like a what do you do question can summarize kind of like where you sit on an intellectual level, where you sit on a financial level. Are you worthwhile having as a friend? Like, will I need to take you out when I go out for drinks somewhere? Are you going to be able to buy anything from me? Are we going to be able to holiday together? So there's a whole bunch of like shadow aspects to those two questions. Where are you from and what do you do? That I feel like are more like prejudicial. Damn it, I need to find out what that word is. Prejudice-y than other questions. And now with that there's word weighting and bias. So when we talk about like racism and racist and prejudice and bigotry, those have become pejoratives. And a pejorative is they have like an energy behind them, where it's like, oh, you're racist, you bigot. It's there, and you can feel the difference when I say it. Like bigot, racism, prejudiced, versus like bigot, racist, prejudice. Like there's word weighting with how we project out our energy. So like all this shaming and blaming that comes up where you call someone a racist, it's like, what are you doing? Like, are you trying to help them understand what they are doing? Or are you just like trying to make yourself feel more superior by calling them a pejorative? The same thing with like calling someone like a nigger or a whatever other racist or bigot term you want to use for another racist, for another class, for another human that you don't like. Really, like all the reductionism that came from intersectionality. Like we create all these terms. Like we've got there's so many like derogatory terms for pockets of humanity that we've made up just to project our hatred onto them. And you just got to own that shit. Like, there's so many. Like you can think of some right now, even for your own whatever box you want to put yourself in. There will be pejorative terms for who you are. Some that are really hurtful. So, like, what can I say about that? All right, another sip of water. Lots of water today. Now, the last part of my story, and I'll probably jump around here, and I might split up this podcast into 2 episodes depending on how much I go. Feminist partners. So, my last quote-unquote relationship, I use quote-unquote because like it was just odd. And she studied gender studies. And I thought that she was, for the most part, a very loving woman. And when there would be things that I would say that would trigger her around men and the economy and technology that would like send her off the chart rage. And these were things like for me, like I would talk about capitalism as like it's the most imperfect system, and I feel like it has a lot of flaws that need to be addressed. However, it is right now one of the more of the sensible systems to use. And she would just lose her mind over it. Like everything was to blame on capitalism, and the other part was men. So like she was always shaming me for being a man around I'm an oppressive person because I am a man, like I was born with a penis. So there's like something inherently wrong with me and my behavior because I was a man. And then white men. So I'm like, what's going on? I had so many like friends that don't get me wrong, were quite would treat women as objects. However, like just to call them like white men and they're responsible for all the problems of the world was like, wait a minute, you know. Some of my friends are they're beautiful. Like the men that I had, there was a mixture. I had a gambit of all classes, all socioeconomic backgrounds, and like they all had like edges to them, and I loved them from where they were at. And the people that I wanted to stay with as friends, I stayed with, and the people that don't, I didn't. So she would always like encourage me to like speak up and like I have to do this, otherwise, you know, I'm part of the problem. And like this is where like gender studies creates activists. It didn't help them look at their own problem and take ownership of where they are at and what they do. It just projects. They just project all this hatred. Like they build. Like you tell someone that all of their misery, all of their issues are related to white men, capitalism, and it's just like they own it. That's what they use. That's the lens that they see the world. And there are hundreds of thousands of academics and students of this discipline that are out there, and they find themselves in media, they find themselves everywhere of places of influence. And I feel like it's something that needs to be addressed as like, you just got to own your own stuff. Like, stop telling me how I need to behave and just own your own stuff. All right, next slide. So that was my story. I probably jumped around a bit there. Now, the intention of trying to push like this anti-racism and fight racism agenda, a lot of it comes off in like sound and vision bites where things are taken out of context. Like the mainstream media is set up to excite you, to help you stay on their channel, and the human body is like built for excitement. Like it loves that dopamine rush. Like it loves the highs, it loves the lows. Like gimme. Like our attention span's gone from like 12 seconds to 8 seconds to like 5 seconds over the past like 30 years. And like the technology does that. Like I'm not going to blame technology for it, but technology will do that. So it starts to become a discipline on how much you want to understand the world. So, like, if you are aware that it's just a bunch of sound and vision bites, and you take it on board, and then you act from that, then it's your shit. Now, the system and abdication. Now, we've been born into a structure. Fact. Part of that system, we are trained to abdicate our authority into people that have credibility. And I speak about credibility in another podcast. So when we're in this space, we feel like like academics and TV stars and news reporters and politicians have credibility, and they tell us what we need to do, they tell us how we need to behave, and this is where the abdication of authority comes in, where the mainstream media will excite you into a place of destabilization, and then you act from that place. Oh, what do I do? What do I do to get rid of this feeling? I need to go protest. Okay. Now, and then you'll see maybe how protests worked, quote unquote, worked in the past. And this is a cognitive bias of assuming that the same thing is going to work again, because of the things like the news cycle and the attention spans. Like, there's a level of exhaustion there, where there's so many things that everyone wants to protest against that you thin the amount of energy across what you're going to protest against. And protesting against systems may have worked for the civil rights movement. However, it's still watered down, and it becomes like this placebo to appease the mob. So you drop in like this law that appeases everyone, and we see this more and more the more intelligent politicians become and think tanks become, where you just get like a placebo, like a pacifier. And it's like, oh, we do this. No, we've done this. Listen to this. Listen to all this money that we've spent. Listen to all this energy that we've spent. But it's in reality, when you dive into the detail, it's this patchworked, like, joke fix just to pacify the masses, to pacify the mob. And a good system takes time. Solutions take time. So if you're running around and trying to change systems, like, you're really not looking in the mirror, because a lot of the issues are coming from you and your insecurities. Who's got the power? So a lot of the racism movement, it's about trying to point out who's got the power, and the blame is on, like, white supremacy. The whites have all the power, and I think it's a beautiful game of chess. It's a beautiful, like, if I was running it, I'd be patting myself on the back at how I have divided the population into so many segments and can so easily war them against each other with a very easy news brief, with a few very intelligently placed videos on social media, by convincing a few powerful or popular people that have a lot of followers. Like, it's very easy to direct who's got the power. In reality, the people who lock people away have the power. The people who can put you in prison, the people who create the laws, the people who adjudicate over the laws have the power. So whoever enforces the laws has the power. And that feels like it's something important to say, because in that space you have a system that can black mark you for life. You get a criminal record. It's very hard to be employed. People don't like hiring ex-cons. In some parts of the world, like in China, you can't travel. So, like, the concept of who can judge you has the power, and that's what the feminist and gender studies movement want. They want the power. They want the power to judge you. They want the power to take away your humanity and take away who you are as an individual, and either call you like a racist or a bigot or a sexist or some other kind of ist. So you no longer are viewed as a human, you are dehumanized. Now, I mentioned before the attention economy, the news cycle. So the news cycle is much faster faster than what it was. When we used to have newspapers, it was like maybe once a week, once a day if you read the Daily Telegraph. The quality newspapers came out once a week. Now, with social media, you've got 24-hour news cycle, and it may get even faster. So the advantage is trying to cycle the news cycle as quickly as possible. And we've seen that with climate change and Greta Thunberg, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. And maybe that's male privilege. And you know who I'm talking about. Then there was COVID, then there's the lockdowns, and it could be a second wave of COVID, and then who knows, more martial law, Black Lives Matter, and so it's about cycling the news cycle so people forget. So you are abdicating your authority, and your only way of getting information is from the mainstream media, and they don't care. Like, if you feel like the mainstream media cares about what they are telling you, I feel like you need to like red pill that, because they don't. Like Channel 9, Channel 10, ABC, SBS, do not care. They are not journalists. They are opinion pieces at best, because they're biased. And journalism is about reporting both sides of the story and allowing the reader to make up their own mind. What it perniciously changed to was telling you what you want to think. And that's on you. That's on abdicating your authority. And then the race for relevance. So in this race for relevance, like, who's more important? Like, you've got blacks are more important. Women are more important. What's more important today. And so in order to, the race for relevance is part of that attention economy, where whatever's hot is what needs to be on the news. This is part of the divide and conquer strategy of whoever you feel like is running the world. I'll touch on this in a hyperdimensional level. However, there are political parties that have no interest in you as a person. They're only interested in being re-elected and controlling the population, not allowing the population to unite. So it's about playing left from right, black from white, women against men, vaccine against anti-vax, like science against spirituality, religion against science, religion against spirituality. Like, it's a rich tapestry. Oil against fossil fuels against renewables. So it's a divide and conquer game, and they win because we allow ourselves to abdicate our authority. Now, the divide and conquer is an old game, old game, and it's also part of the cultural Marxism playbook. So, like in Hungary and countries where communism and Marxism became like in vogue, where you blame the rich, you blame the rich for all the issues, you blame like somebody else for all the issues. The people don't care. They just want them to tell you, they want to be told who is responsible for their hurt, who is responsible for their pain. And we see that with like Antifa and people that riot and people that get angry and want to kill other people and like drive their cars into other people and riot and cause violence. It's like, or pull them aside and would happily march them into gas chambers. Like you feed that. Again, it's abdicating your authority, and cultural Marxism is evil. It's an evil doctrine, because it's pernicious. You don't really know it's there until it's there. It's the boogeyman, the intellectual academic boogeyman, and I recommend reading more up on it if that's something that you want to explore. Don't take my word for any of this. I feel like if it's something that you want to have a look at, like, look at it. Like, it's the same strategy that Hitler used, same strategy that I can't remember the guy. Stalin. Just having another drink of water. So have a look at it. So it's like right now they're blaming the white men, and like white men are like, what the fuck? Because you've got the middle class, which make up the majority of the population, going, wait a minute, like I'm struggling too. Like I hate my job, I hate where I am, you know, or and I'm comfortable where I am, but my marriage is a mess, my kids hate me, and I'm stuck in a job. I've been working the same job for like 40 years or 30 years. I've been wanting to like try and get out of this, and I'm stuck with bills, I'm stuck with debt. So it's like I'm the problem, like I'm struggling, like, so it's like the middle class component is like, you're losing out. So you try and convince the middle class that all of their problems are related to the rich, and then you've got a divide. Boom. Run that playbook. Public communicators. Now, this is where I feel like as a civilization we really struggle with. We have academics that are very smart. They can have PhDs, which on the sphere of knowledge, it's like a hair follicle. Like if the Earth was like, if the size of the Earth represented the amount of knowledge that we know, a PhD is like a grain of sand on the Earth. That's the volume that we assume that they know. PhDs are nothing that can, like, how do I put this? We assume that because you have a PhD, you have much more credibility. And like if you have a look at some PhDs of people, it's like, oh, that's interesting. However, it doesn't mean that they know more. Like I feel like it's valuable to acknowledge that they have some wisdom in that field. However, it doesn't mean that you put them on a throne and they are the be all and end all of that knowledge, of that field of knowledge. So anyway, public communicators, we really struggle with like academics being able to communicate at a down-to-earth level, non-patronizingly to the population. I feel like Neil deGrasse Tyson does his best at times, and he's someone that I feel can't deal with his emotions around people that aren't as smart as him, and there's an air of superiority around that, and academics have that. When you put like a PhD as like a credibility pedestal, as like a trophy, there's like, oh, I know, and he's very good at astrophysics. However, there's still much more that we can learn, and I feel like as a communicator, he does an amazing job. Don't get me wrong. However, I feel like when it comes to the gender studies, I feel like we really lack grounded, loving communicators. People that want to communicate at a loving place, that want to educate people around like the difference between like bigotry, racism, and prejudice. Like, yeah, I feel like there's this space for people that can educate in a more broad sense and resist the urge to try and create activism. Like I feel like if you're creating an activist, you are no longer a commentator, and you are an instigator. You're moving from a teaching space into like an activism space. Like you're trying to tell someone that all of their problems are because of this, and they need to do something about it. This is how you can change the world, and I think that's flawed. However, if you do it, you're abdicating your authority. Now, context matters, and I feel like like I've used some pejoratives here that people might frame as like, oh, this is I'm reinforcing bigotry and prejudice and systemic racism. Oh, by the way, there's multiple types of racism. And so what tends to happen with like all these sound bites and vision bites is that the context is removed. And you see this with all the reporting on Trump, how it's changed to because people don't like him. And so this is part of that bias where, like, confirmation bias, where people they love having their opinions reinforced. So it's like, if you're convinced outside of context, or you don't know what context is, I feel like it's a component that really matters in regards to understanding how prejudice and bigotry and racism plays out. Because depending on where you are, there's different mechanisms behind prejudice and racism. And I'll explain what both of those things are, all those three things are. Removing discernment. So part of this movement, like the trying to attack, be an anti-racist, is to remove your own individual discernment. I'm just going to have another drink of water. Where it's like, they tell you how you need to think. This is part of groupthink, where it's like, black people are being killed because of racism. Okay, all right. I hear that. So in order to stop it, you got to focus on like white supremacy and white power and white privilege. It's like, well, no, I disagree with that. So it's about the way gender studies works is it's solely focused around removing the patriarchy. And so when you buy into that, it's about trying to remove men from seats of power. It's trying to like give more power to blacks and take away power from whites. So this is where that zero sum game comes in, where it's like you're not creating anything. You're actually trying to remove something from somebody else and give it to somebody else, which is part of the cultural Marxism ideology. And how is power calculated? So, like fame and resources. Like, how would you define yourself as powerful? Like, if you look at someone in the world who's really powerful, like, what makes them powerful to you? And then, like, do they have a say about things? Like, is it the amount of followers they have? Like, if you're in the coaching realm, like how many clients are they converting at a funnel event? Like all that kind of, like, what's power? What do you think power is? Again, I mentioned before about activism. Like, by staying silent, you're a part of the problem. And for me, like, there's a quote that gets flown around like, good when good men, evil and good men. Like, if evil prevails when good men do nothing. And yeah, I definitely think that there's a component to that. And using it on everything that you want to try and change the world on is just going to get exhausting. Like, it's really about what the individual wants to do. And I feel like giving more people tools to connect to their inner authority, what is right for them, the more we will see people uniting on something that they feel really passionate about, and not something that they need to virtue signal on or feel guilty about, like white privilege. Like, I don't want to have privilege. I'm white, but I don't want to have privilege. I don't want to feel this guilty anymore. Oh, I need to do this. I don't want to be part of the problem. I want to help. Can you see how manipulative that is? Now, over the past week or so, a lot of leaders, I consider leaders in the spiritual community, they have, in regards to power, like, they have a big reach. They are referenced a lot. I would only be looking at the number of followers they have, the number of people that respond to their post or comment on their posts, how I know that other people talk about them within the community. Like, a lot of the spiritual community are rescuers. Like, let's be honest. Like, they make great healers, and they are also rescuers. So when you put yourself in a drama triangle dynamic of a persecutor, rescuer, victim, as soon as you see like a black person or someone that fits the description of a quote unquote oppressed class, and you put them in that victim role, like first of all, I feel it's a disservice to them as a human, and you need to create a persecutor. Like, it doesn't work without having all three. So there's a lot of leaders in the spiritual community that are pushing to back this cultural Marxism playbook. Like, and it's a pernicious slope to abdicating authority and putting targets on people where the target is misplaced, and it is dangerous. So I feel like this needs to be not necessarily called out. However, you yourself need to check your own authority. Now, are you abdicating your authority? Now, by following this person that you've looked up to, and you may have been coached by them in the past, you may like all their posts, you might share their posts, like, are you following them because of your bias towards them? Like, you don't want to change your opinion of them because it might reflect badly on you? Like, you really need to check in with your heart and say, like, does this feel right for me? Or whatever your inner authority is, like it's a bodily authority. You need to check yourself. Another sip of water. Police brutality. Now, this is big. And I feel like this is where you have a combination of bad actors within the police force, bad apples, and a bad barrel. And what do I mean by those things? So I'll only touch on bad apples and bad barrels. You can have a look at what a bad actor is. Now, a bad apple is someone that you might identify in a group of people or in a collective that, oh no, it's just them. It's that one person that's standing out that is the issue. You know, it's just focus on him, pull him out of there, you know, put him wherever they need to be, or she wherever they need to be, and, you know, the problem will be fixed. Okay? And the bad barrel is where it's like, oh, there's an actual an issue that's more systemic. There's something else that's going on here. And, like, we saw this in Abu Ghraib. Abu Ghraib is still a concentration camp. Sorry. It's a terrorist processing camp, where people that are identified as being a threat to national security are held there and were during the Iraq War and various insurgent type activities. They would be put there in this prison and they would be interrogated. And there was horrendous footage of soldiers humiliating humans. And this is where it's like this abdication of authority is very dangerous for people that have power. And they may have been lower ranking officers. However, when you start to turn a blind eye and like or uprank or defer your authority to somebody else, like lower ranking soldiers said, oh, you know, my upper ranking whoever was in charge of me said it was okay. You know, it's being taken care of. You know, even just saying like, nah, someone's taking care of this, like you will abdicate your authority. So if you see someone in a uniform, you straight away a uniform can abdicate your authority. Oh, there's someone there in uniform. Like there's so much that is used to abdicate, that can be used to abdicate our authority. So with police brutality, like I think you've got varying degrees and they're on a spectrum. Like police, they can be overworked. In Australia, they're very underfunded. And there's also an element of trauma that does not get addressed here. Vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, where like an officer can have a bad day, and we all have fucking bad days, and like being able to talk about it, like you can be red flagged for being someone that's emotionally unstable, and then like you get this reputation for like you got like you don't have the gall, you don't have the power, you don't have the strength to be an officer. And I feel like this is deeply, deeply unfair, because police officers are fucking human. Just because they wear a badge and have a uniform and they carry out the laws which are given to them, and they also have quotas to fill. Like, I feel like there's a whole bunch of things that I'm sure that if you asked officers one-on-one and they were anonymous, they would think that this is incorrect. This is not fair. And there's definitely, we do not, in Australia in particular, we do not support whistleblowing, and whistleblowers get dragged over the coals. And I feel like there's definitely a systemic issue within the police and the military and anyone that carries out and enacts and acts out laws, enforces laws that need help. Like, seriously, I feel the police force needs help. And by just like writing them off as like white supremacists and out to get you and they only want to fuck you up is bullshit. Because for me, my experience with the police, I've never had an issue with the police. I've seen plenty of videos about issues with the police. And for me, the inner work wise that I did was that I owned my hatred towards authority. Like, I owned my fear around it. Like, I started to, in meditation, like, I would send like the police force an authority love. And that's part of my discernment practice. But just send like they're human. Like, in the minute that you start to dehumanize them, like, oh, they're coppers or pigs or whatever it is, you lose. You fucking lose. And you're not owning your shit. Now, who falls through the cracks? Now, when you look at just race, again, I'll reiterate that it's a social construct, a patriarchal social construct. Like, you get poor white people, lower class white people. You get like powerful rich blacks. You get poor Asian people, poor Indian people, rich Indian people. Like, you can't, which is why intersectionality was born. Because they realized that it wasn't just black and white anymore. There was a need to create more division. So you might have more like white lower class people, white people that are that have struggled. And again, like, I did a podcast on ACE scores. Like, for me, like, people that are low on the ACE, are high on the ACE scores, tend to be the people that fall through the cracks. Like, if you grew up without a father and you were white, you have a much higher chance of drug abuse and jail time and long-term chronic disease. So for me, like, the whole concept of like the gender studies being like a crowning discipline in trying to fix the issues of the world is like well short of the mark. So yeah, that's who falls through the cracks are the most vulnerable, and a lot of energy, airtime, media time, like energy gets put on people that at a generalization level. And there's vulnerable people that fall through the cracks. And those vulnerable people feed the middle class. So when you don't address this early, you have trauma that is passed to the next generation. And right now in the collective, the middle class has got a lot of trauma that I feel needs to be addressed. And talking about white, black, men, women, or the gender studies type division, it's going to cause more long-term chronic illness, more confusion around who you are as a person, more suicides, more depression, more pharmaceuticals, being used, more violence, more disconnection, and like it just like the cultural Marxism playbook is evil and it doesn't work. So yeah, just flick to the next slide here. So basically the intention, I've got a picture on my slide of, I want to say it's, I can't remember who it was. I want to say it's Karl Marx. Could be Stalin. Could be someone, I don't know. I'm looking at him and I feel like embarrassed. And it's just like, fuck, dude, damn, John. Why don't I know this? Anyway, I got a slide of someone that was very fond of the cultural Marxist playbook and communism, and they were aiming for a utopia. So when you promise someone a utopia, it's too good to be true. It's like luring someone into a car with goodies. It's it's Willy Wonka. Like, it's not going to end well for you. Like, it's the utopia starts with you doing your own work. And the other picture that I have on this slide is homogenization. The aim is to homogenize humanity. Make everybody equal, make everybody be the same. This is groupthink and part of thought policing, where I've got a picture of a whole bunch of NPCs. Now, if you're not familiar with the NPC meme, it's hilarious. And again, it's a pejorative, and it's part of the whole thing about like the left can't meme, and like it's purely about like when you don't conform to whatever the mainstream media narrative is, or whatever like the gender studies narrative is, like you are ridiculed, pushed out, cancel culture. So all that cancel culture stuff came from the gender studies and the Marxism playbook. And it's basically a homogenization. And what does that mean? Everyone to be the same. And this is also something that's in human design, where it's anti-homogenization, where it's about being the most individual that you can be, and then you will find your tribe. And only then. And if you're trying to find your tribe before that, it usually means you've got some trauma that you need to look at. Now, I probably should have done this slide at the beginning, but, you know, we're this far now. And it's about prejudice, bigotry, and racism. And I'm going to read these out. I'm going to have a drink of water before I do that. Now, prejudice. Prejudice is when a person negatively prejudges another person or group without getting to know the beliefs, thoughts, and feelings behind their words and actions. A person of any racial group can be prejudiced towards a person of any other racial group. There is no power dynamic involved. Again, I'd like to reiterate that race is a social construct and part of the patriarchy. Bigotry. Bigotry is stronger than prejudice, a more severe mindset, and often accompanied by discriminatory behaviour. It's arrogant and mean-spirited, but requires neither systems nor power to engage in. So I have a lot of family members that I'd classify in as bigots and bigotry, and same again with prejudice. Like I know a lot of people in my life that are prejudiced and are bigots, and I check in with my heart if it's worthwhile talking to them about it. Otherwise, it's not why. Like, you gotta want to change. And then racism. Racism is the system that allows the racial group that's already in power to retain power. Since arriving on US soil, white people have used their power to create preferential access to survival rights and resources, housing, education, jobs, voting and citizenship, food, health, legal protection, etc., for white people, while simultaneously impeding people of colour's access to these same rights and resources. Though reverse racism is a term I sometimes hear, it has never existed in America. White people are the only racial group to have ever existed and retained power in the United States. So again, and this is from DebbieIrving.com. Freudian. DebbieIrving.com. And I checked that website out, and she had some good stuff there that I had a look at. That if you want to, like, for me, like, I don't want to cherry pick. I really want to like dive deep and understand like what was going on both sides of the fence here. And like I feel like it's like yes and no. So when you go white people, automatically you're assuming that because someone has a pigment in their skin, that they're trying to stop somebody else from getting the same. And I feel like this is really damaging, and doesn't help. It really doesn't help. And the whole concept of racism, I feel, just isn't helpful, because it doesn't tackle the issues of your own shit, like prejudice and bigotry. Yes, I feel like there's a lot of that. Like, you see that on all, like, the entire globe, and no one, I feel, escapes those two. There's something that you do inside of you, and this is part of the primal brain of checking whether something's safe or not. Is this, and like calling someone a bigot, calling someone prejudiced, I think, like, doesn't help them. Because it's like, well, you can say what you said hurt me. Like, it's about your feelings. As soon as you say that they're prejudiced, a bigot, or racist, doesn't mean it doesn't do anything. Tell them how you fucking feel. Like, that hurt. That's what's really going on. That hurt. You calling me that name fucking hurt me. Like, I felt that, and just own your hurt. Tell them that they're prejudiced and bigot and racist means nothing. It's like just throwing out labels for the sake of labels. It doesn't help. I feel like it was really not helpful. And it's weighted. The term is weighted. Racism is weighted. So, like, it's got a pejorative tone to it, and like it destroys communication, destroys the ability to build a bridge. It's about, like, it's like punching someone. Like, you're a racist. Like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to discuss this. And you see it you see it when people are in protesting. It's like, they just say it. They scream it out. Like it's like a baby throwing a tantrum. Like, you are this, you are that. And like, I hate you, mum and dad. I hate you. I hate you. It's like, all right. Yes. Now, psychology. Ooh. There's going to be some dense content in here. I've been watching a lot of videos. Now, psychology. So, stereotypes, profiling, prejudice, and thin slicing. So, stereotypes exist. Like, you look at computer games, you look at Mario Kart, you look at there's stereotypes everywhere, and for me, I find them fucking hilarious. Like The Simpsons, stereotypes. There's something that's deeply funny about looking at that there's common traits that all tribes of humans have. Like, if I said, all right, you meet a Jamaican for the first time, what are the things you're going to assume about them? If you met someone from Ireland, what are some things that you're going to assume that they do? What about England? Someone from England or London, what do you expect that they're going to eat? Someone from India, what do you expect they're going to eat? And there'll be a good chance that you're going to pick who they are. What some characteristics that are going to be common for them. Profiling is something as well. So this ties back in with the police force as well, and people that are in positions of power, where there's an assumption that because they are this way, that they can be something. And I profile in my job, so I have I use character analysis to profile. And for me, like it's about loving the person first, knowing that they're a human being and they have their own individual story before I lean in and help them unstitch what's holding them back in their life. So I feel like as an officer or someone in the military will have a pretty good idea about like something that's in a person, and this is edging into like energetics and hyperdimensional, where like you can kind of feel that there could be something wrong about a person, and this is where you need to tease apart like what kind of trauma and what's your own prejudices and bigotry that's coming through. And this is where I feel like someone that needs to be unbiased would benefit from like looking at like, fuck, I judge black people like one way, or being able to get out the hatred. It's like if you've been a beat cop or someone that spends a lot of time in the community for like years, you need to get some fucking catharsis. You need help to discharge some of the frustrations that you might get in the community. Like you could be arresting the same person, warning the same person like day in, day out. Like if you look at it like a parent, like, and if you're a parent listening to this and you snap at one of your kids, like it's the same thing. Same thing if you're a manager or a healer. The healer, you're telling your client like the same thing again and again and again. Like you're going to get frustrated, and everyone needs to be able to release that hatred and anger and frustration constructively. And in thin slicing, so within the first like 7 seconds to 2 minutes, you've kind of made up your mind about a person that you've met for the first time. And thin slicing is a thing. It's been studied, and not that gives it any credibility, but there's pretty good like examples that we judge someone for the first 2 minutes of their conversing, which is why we ask questions like, where are you from and what do you do? Because it helps reduce the variables of like trying to work out, is this person trustworthy? Do I want this person to be a friend? All that kind of stuff. So when it comes down to profiling someone, like if you've spent a lot of your time on mainstream media and being fed like how the mainstream media portrays people of color, blacks, or any, like, to be honest, anyone that doesn't look like you, and then take that on board, there's a good chance you're missing out on a whole rainbow of that person's life and their experience. What I will say here is like when you have like for people that have a lot of multi-generational trauma, if you haven't dealt with that multi-generational trauma, like doing inner work, you carry an energy, you carry a vibe that feels like unclean, like dirty, like it feels heavy and sticky, and like for me, like I'd happily talk to people of anyone that is struggling and trying to help them get to wherever they want to go. Like I'd offer my services, and I do. Like I've been running free workshops almost the entire lockdown, and like it's up to somebody else if they want to take it up. Like I'm not going to go save people. They need to make a conscious choice. I'm not going to pull people over the line. You need to make a choice if you want to change your life. Pygmalion, Galatea, and Golem effect. So, for me, and how I see all of my clients is based on the Pygmalion effect, and that's where you have this container for greatness for your client. You see their potential and you hold it there, and you have to believe it with your entire being, and it needs to be honest. It can't be fake. And so for me, like part of doing inner work is you're able to hold that container for someone. You hold a container for their potential. It doesn't matter what their past is, what they've done. If they want to change their life, you hold that container. And as a coach and as a healer, I feel like that's an important responsibility. And if you're just pulling this client on board for money, like that's your own integrity. That's your own That's your own choice. However, if you can't hold a container for that client in their greatness, like, I question your motivations as a healer and a coach. So the Pygmalion effect is basically you believe in that person, and that person will grow into that container. And it's got to be honest. It's got to be in integrity. And if you feel that the person is not living up to their end of the bargain and their actions, you've got to cut them loose. Like, it's just like, I believe in you, however, it just feels like you're not ready right now, and you've got to go. And how that plays in with the lost hope in fighting racism is that when you divide people by race, you're automatically putting them in a victim stance. Like, they're oppressed. The blacks are oppressed. Like, it's white supremacists that are the issue. Automatically, in the Pygmalion dynamic, you're putting whites in a lower state. Like, they are like a problem, which is like a golem. Like, a golem effect where you believe that the person is horrible. You believe the person is like worthless and they don't help, and they're part of a problem, a larger problem. And so I think we're going to start to see, depending on whether this movement has a bigger foothold or not, is like white people coming down with all kind of psychosomatic illnesses about like their white guilt. And the Galatea effect, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Galatea, is where you have belief in yourself. Where you believe that you are here to do something, that what you're allowed, you can fall down and get back up again, and you have this very sensible like locus of control around your life, and you are responsible. You do your best to not abdicate your authority, and this is where, like, when you believe in yourself, you're much more resilient, and you achieve your goals. You achieve like your soul's purpose. So those three effects all play in with each other. Where like when you're in a healing place, and I feel like that the gender studies movement is doing their best. They really do genuinely feel like they're trying to help people who are oppressed. When you take into account these, it's a zero-sum game, because you're trying to pull white people down and you're trying to elevate blacks. Zero-sum. Let's elevate everyone at the same time, huh? Tribal groups and monopolies. Now, this might be prejudice and bigotry bound. However, like, this is a reality. Is like, you will have people that associate with groups, and they'll have like their own secret handshakes and their own meeting places, and they might have their own like religious affiliations, and they have monopolies around it. Like, you will find, that people will join these groups in order to get more power, in order to get more influence, and you are disadvantaged when you are not in these groups. And like, that's just the reality, you know. Like, I feel like if you're trying to level the playing field, like, you really got to level the playing field. However, there's always going to be these tribal groups and monopolies that exist. And it's part of humanity. It's part of the part of us that likes to belong. However, these tribal groups and monopolies also abdicate their own authority. I feel like they're running from a script of conditioning around what is fame, what is success, like, and like, you see a lot of that pain there, a lot of multi-generational trauma, a lot of people that are in unhappy marriages, and then they might appear to have all of the benefits and fame and be happy, but they're not. Like, if you really check in with a person, like, they'll be on a good chance, I'll be generalizing here, they'll be on some kind of pharmaceutical, they'll have some kind of crisis within their family, they don't talk to their parents, there'll be some kind of thing that is an issue, because it doesn't work. Like, it works if you're, it's a generalization, it works if you're in the Matrix and you want to abide by the rules of whatever the Matrix subscribes to, that is success and fame. So there's a lot of religious groups and other groups that you can join that will give you more access to clients, more access to networking. And then if you're doing that just to do that, well, that's on you. And if it feels like your heart needs to do that, then that's part of your soul's journey to do that. However, it exists. And they are prejudiced, and there's bigotry in there because they will exclude other people, and I understand that. Like, that's just the reality of being human, is that you're going to have groups, and if you want to break down the barriers around that and build bridges, you can't judge them. You can't, it doesn't help. Like the whole thing around judging a group just doesn't help. It's like you gotta, if you can't send them love, then the issue is with you. Because at the end of the day, they are humans and they're just trying to survive like everybody else, and you don't know their story. Social engineering and diversity training. Now, social engineering is the end game of the gender studies movement, and feminism and cultural Marxism. So it's about trying to engineer a perfect utopia, and it doesn't work. Like, you end up creating more rigidity in the body, more armoring, more inauthenticity, and it just pushes it underground. It represses it, and you will see much more psychosomatic illness from it. More people, as I mentioned before, more depression, more all kinds of stuff is going to come through. And then diversity training. So you go into corporations, and this is like big money. Like, diversity training has become in vogue for HR departments and for anybody that has come from education that has been talking about white privilege and that kind of background of education. So, like, diversity training is where they try and train you that being white, you've basically profited off black slavery, sorry, and you're a bad person and you need to pay penance for that. It's like feel guilty, and then they don't help you address the trauma that comes up. They just tell you that you're a shit person, and then leave you standing there holding that. So again, it's zero sum. The drink of water. And that my next point on this slide, the psychology slide, is compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. So again, like, when you're running around, when you're looking at these articles, when you're like watching videos of like black people being like beaten up, and like there's you're empathizing with that person. Like, you're feeling what they're going through, like you can hear their cries of pain, you can see what's going on, and your body responds to that, and it takes up space in your emotional container. So what happens is in this wanting the false hope in fighting racism is that I don't feel that a lot of people are prepared to take on all of that, and then when they're in this aroused emotional state, they do things that are not part of their authority. They abdicate their authority. So, and compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma is something that needs to be addressed in the collective. It's something that is very real, and it's something that if you're posting stuff that is related to like empathizing with people, I feel like you have a responsibility to care for them if you're going to post stuff like that. Crab mentality. So this is something that is seen quite a bit. No, we've seen this in the riots, where like there's people of color that are rioting and just breaking up other people's neighborhoods. Like, and this is part of where, like, if I can't have it, you can't, and where like people, you turn on each other. And we see this can also be tied in with like tall poppy syndrome, where somebody wants to do better and the people that they were with want to try and pull them down. And it tends to be geographical. It can also be socioeconomic as well. Well, like in the States, for example, like in New York and in LA, like everyone encourages you to be the top shit. Like, yeah, man, like start a business. Like, fuck yeah, it can also be a bit fake. However, there's different energy behind it. Like, yeah, man, you do that. You fucking do that. You know, you put your mind to that. You push. You do that. And then in Australia, there can be an element of like tall poppy, where they want to pull you down. Like, people love the feeling of pulling down someone that's popular and has fame, and like that's a shadow. Like, it's shadow. Crab mentality is shadow. Optimism bias and projection of helplessness. So part of this hope is like this optimism that if we just solve racism and white supremacy and capitalism and all these like quote unquote systems of oppression, then everything's going to be fixed. And then you by doing that, you create a triangle. And then you put anybody that's not in whatever the position of power is as a victim, and you're away. So here with like the optimism bias, you've got a group of people that want to feel better, and they where do I go with this? I'm going blank. It almost feels like I want to stop here and continue in the next one. I think I might do that. Optimism bias and projection of helplessness. So I feel like this is definitely something which I can explore deeper into. Psychology is going to like be quite exhausting energetically, and I feel like I'll break it up. This feels like a good moment to stop. I can feel like I'm pushing here, and I don't need to push. So if you've gotten this far, awesome, much love. And if you feel like sharing it, share it, and I will complete the rest of it in another podcast. And I'd love to hear your feedback. Like, I'm open to criticism. I'm open to other people's stories. And I feel like it's important. This conversation and podcast is important because I see what's going on. I've got a lot of love for people, and I see that a lot of people are hurting, and a lot of people want to help, and I feel like they're being taken advantage of. Their emotions are being taken advantage of because they're not given the tools in order to be discerning. Again, big love, and I will see you in the next one. Big love. Bye.